The Great Whore of Babylon, a reading from certain editions of Holy Writ. The edition before us is the Biblia Sacra Vulgata, the Clementine Vulgate. Lectio ex Apocalypsi Beati Ioannis Apostoli, quia vera et justa judicia sunt eius, qui judicavit de meretrice magna, quae corrupit terram in prostitutione suo, et vindicavit sanguinem servorum suorum de manibus eius. Now we shall try to pronounce this in the so-called Roman pronunciation. I think that St. Pius X, 1903 to 1914, gave it this name, but really the classical Romans did not pronounce it this way. In reality, this is the Italianate pronunciation or the ecclesiastical pronunciation. Lectio ex Apocalypsi Beati Ioannis Apostoli, quia vera et justa judicia sunt eius, qui judicavit de meretrice magna, quae corrupit terram in prostitutione suo, et vindicavit sanguinem servorum suorum de manibus eius. And now we shall read the same verse from Scrivener's 1894 Textus Receptus, and this is the text that underlies the King James Version of the Bible. First, we shall read this employing the classical Greek pronunciation, and then we shall read this using the modern Greek pronunciation. Apocalypsis tu Hagiu Ioannu tu theologu hoti aletinai kai decai hai Chryses autu hoti ekrina tein pornein tein megalein hetis eptera tein gein en te pornei ae autes kai exedices to haima ton dulon autu ectes kairos autes. And now to try to pronounce this using the modern Greek pronunciation, Apocalypsis, Tov, Agiov, Yoanov, Tov, Theologov, Oti, Aleithini, Ki, Dikii, E, Krisis, Avtov, Oti, Ekrina, Teen, Pornin, Teen, Megalin, Etus, Thera, Teen, Gin, Nt, Pornia, Avtis, Ki, Exe, Dekisa, Ta, Ima, Ton, Dovlon, Avtov, Ek, Tis, Kiros, Avtis. This is the 18th century Blayney Oxford version of the Authorized Version or King James Bible as presented in the Old Schofield Reference Bible, published by Oxford University Press. We are going to read chapter 19, verse 2. For true and righteous are his judgments, for he hath judged the great whore, which did corrupt the earth with her fornication, and hath avenged the blood of his servants at her hand. With the Scrivener Textus Receptus in one hand and the King James Bible in the other, we can actually learn a bit of Greek vocabulary. For instance, here we have the word theologu, which means theologian. Theos is Greek for God. Logos is Greek for reason. And so a theologos is someone who reasons about God. We have here aleitenai, which means true. Aletheia is the Greek word for truth. Here we have dikaios. Dikaios means just, and some philosophers spend their time writing theodicies, which comes from the Greek phrase ha theos este dikaios, which means God is just. And so whenever a theologian writes a theodicy, he is attempting to justify why God allows evil. It is really a reckoning with the problem of evil. We have here the word porne for prostitute, and we get words like pornography from this. Graphe means a drawing, so pornography is the drawing, is etymologically drawings of prostitutes. We have the word here, megalein. Mega means big. or in this context, great. So you've got Tain Porning, Tain Megalin, the great whore. Here you have gain, the Greek word gain, which is a contraction of Gaia, which is the earth goddess or the earth. Here you have porneia, which the King James Version translates as fornication. So, you know, here you have sexual immorality. The KJV and other places uses the phrase whoredoms, so maybe something like that. Yeah, I find the KJV an extremely funny book with some of the translation choices and stuff like that. Here we have the word doulos, which means slave or servant. And here you have the word kair or kairos, which means hand. That word there, krises, is related to our word crisis. Here we have the word haima. We get words like hematology from this. We shall now read this verse from the Chalna revision of the Douay-Rheims Bible. Incidentally, this is actually quite a good book should you want to learn Greek as well, because in the footnotes it sometimes goes into the Greek, often to make the point that this translation is more accurate than the King James Version. This is what the churchmen who put this Bible together, that's what they're trying to argue for in some of the footnotes, that the KJV in some of its translations has either gotten things wrong or have cynically mistranslated some verses for sectarian reasons. However, I have read some Protestant Bibles and they make some good points that in places Catholics do the exact same thing. They cleverly translate stuff to try to either hide some Protestantism in the text or to try to put some Catholicism into the text. So I just find it interesting to read the footnotes in this. And then you could read the footnotes in the Geneva Bible. The Geneva Bible was written by Protestants, Calvinists, and they wrote footnotes that are criticizing Catholic doctrine and stuff like that. It's just for an historical perspective on what the Christian churches believed a few hundred years ago, from roughly the late 1500s, which is when the Rheims New Testament came out, to the 1700s, when Chalna revised his version of the Douay-Rheims. I think this version is from either the late 1800s or the early 1900s. I'm not actually quite sure, but it does not matter for our purposes now. For true and just are his judgments, who hath judged the great harlot, which corrupted the earth with her fornication, and hath revenged the blood of his servants at her hands. Now we are going to read the same verse. The book of the Apocalypse, chapter 19, verse 2, from the original Reims New Testament, which was released in 1582. The reason I go to this is because this is basically the Vulgate in English. The Challoner revision is probably a better translation of the Bible overall, but I think that he went back to the Greek and Hebrew a little bit, and also he tried to imitate the King James Version in some places. So even though the Challoner edition is probably a better version of the Bible, nevertheless, for the purposes of learning the Latin of the Vulgate, this is probably a more useful edition. So let us begin. Because true and just are his judgments, which hath judged of the great harlot that hath corrupted the earth in her whoredom, and hath revenged the blood of his servants of her hands. And so, with the Clementine Vulgate Vercelloni edition in one hand and the Reims New Testament in the other, we can learn some Latin vocabulary. Here we have the word meretrix. Meretrix. Our word merit comes from this. The etymological idea is that meretrix is a woman who earns or merits her living by selling her body. Here you have the word sanguis. We get English words such as sanguinary from this. Most of this is basically English. We have the word here vera, which means true. English words such as veracity. Here you have the word justus. We get English words such as justice from unjust from this. Here you have the word judicia, or in the church pronunciation, judicia, and from this you get words like judiciary, legal words such as judiciary. Here you have the word corrupit. It is actually related, I was looking this word up on Wiktionary, and it is actually related to the word rupture. So So with corruption, things are being ruptured and essentially rotting away. If blood vessels become ruptured, then the person dies and he begins to rot. So something like that etymological idea. Here you have the word terra, which means land or the earth, like the Greek word gain or gay or gay or Gaia that we met in the Greek version. Here you have the word terra, the Latin word. We have words like terrain and terra firma. Terra firma is solid ground. Here you have the word here manibus, which means hands. Words like manuscript and manual come from this. Here you have the word caput, which means head, or in this context, chapter. Here you have the word versum, from which we get the word verse. Versum means a turning, perhaps a turn of phrase or the turning of words. I'm not quite sure what the etymological idea behind this is. Here you have the word magna. We saw the Greek word mega or megala, megalane in the Greek Textus Receptus. So here you have the word magna or mania, and we get words like magnificent and magnanimous. A magnanimous person has a great soul. Magna, great, anima, soul. Here we have the word beatus, which means happy. We get words like beatific from this. And beatitudes. The beatitudes in Greek, I think, are called hoi makarioi. That's what the beatitudes are in Greek. This is the Greek word here for the beatitudes. Hoi makarioi, hoi makarioi. The beatitudes. So after our ecumenical Bible study using both Protestant and Catholic versions of the Bible, this version and this version is Protestant, whereas this version and the red version are Catholic. So after our ecumenical Bible study, we can see the utility of using the Bible to learn Latin and Greek. From what I gather, the Latin and the Greek that are used in the Bible are much simpler than other Latin and Greek texts that you might come across. Also, we are greatly familiar with this text. Speaking of myself, I have had the Bible read to me for about 30 years, so I can associate Latin and Greek vocabulary that I might come across with Bible verses, and this I find helps me to remember them